There are moments in life when attraction doesn't arrive with words, it arrives with energy. No clear confession, no bold statement, no "I like you" text, just a quiet shift in how someone behaves when you're around. And if you've ever felt confused about someone's feelings, you're not alone. Because the truth is, people rarely say what they feel right away. They show it first in the smallest, most unnoticed ways. A glance that lasts half a second too long. A pause that feels a little too intentional. A body that naturally turns toward you even in a crowded room. It's subtle, almost invisible if you're not paying attention, but once you notice it, you can't unsee it. Attraction is not always loud or dramatic. In fact, the strongest kind of pull is usually quiet, almost unspoken, living in the space between two people rather than in their words. And here's the interesting part. When a man is drawn to someone, he doesn't always have the confidence or even the awareness to say it directly, but his body speaks before his mind catches up. The way he positions himself, the way he reacts to your presence, the way he stays just a little closer than necessary, it all starts forming a pattern that tells a story he hasn't put into words yet. So the real question isn't whether he will say it. The real question is, can you recognize what he's already showing you before he ever says a single thing? When a man is drawn to someone, one of the earliest and most honest signs shows up in something very simple: distance. Not what he says, not what he promises, but how close he chooses to be when there is absolutely no need to be. Because attraction doesn't always announce itself loudly. Most of the time, it quietly shows up in where a person places their body when you're in the same space. You might not notice it at first. It doesn't feel dramatic. It feels normal. He just happens to be nearby. In a group setting, he doesn't sit on the opposite side. He doesn't drift too far away where interaction would be unlikely. Instead, he naturally settles into a position that keeps him within your reach, not invading your space, not forcing attention, but staying close enough that you become part of his focus without either of you saying a word about it. And what makes this even more interesting is that it doesn't look planned. It doesn't feel calculated. It feels like coincidence. Until you start noticing a pattern. He adjusts his position when you move. He lingers a little longer than necessary when the moment should naturally end. Even in casual environments, he tends to end up near you more often than logic would explain. Sometimes he creates small, harmless reasons just to remain close. A question that doesn't really need asking. A comment that could have been said from a distance but somehow brings him nearer. A moment where he stays just a few seconds longer after everyone else has already shifted away. None of these things stand out on their own, but together they quietly reveal something deeper. Attention naturally seeks closeness, because when a man is not interested, space is easy. He doesn't think about where he stands. He doesn't adjust. He doesn't drift toward anyone in particular. But when he is drawn to someone, something changes inside his behavior. His body starts making decisions before his mind fully catches up. He doesn't consciously say, "I want to be near her." Instead, he simply stays where you are. And this is what makes this sign so powerful. It's not loud, it's not forced, and it's not something he announces. It's something he does without realizing it. Attraction quietly removes distance before it ever becomes a conversation. There is something incredibly honest about the way a person looks at you when they are genuinely drawn in. Words can be controlled, behavior can be edited, even emotions can be hidden for a while, but the eyes usually reveal what the rest of the person is trying not to say. And when a man is attracted, his gaze starts to change in a way that is hard to explain, but very easy to feel. At first, it may seem normal. Just a glance here and there. Nothing obvious, nothing intense. But slowly, something shifts. You start noticing that his eyes don't just pass over you the way they do with everyone else. They pause. They return. They linger just a little longer than what would be considered casual. And that small difference is where the truth starts to show. It's not about staring in a bold or uncomfortable way. It's something softer than that. More subtle. More humans. He looks at you even when there is no need to. During conversations, his attention doesn't drift away as quickly as it does with others. Even when he's pretending to focus on something else, You catch those small moments where his eyes come back to you, almost like they're checking in without permission. And then there's the moment of eye contact. That brief connection where both of you notice each other at the same time. In those seconds, something interesting often happens. The look doesn't break immediately. There's a pause, just long enough to feel different from a normal glance, but not long enough to feel uncomfortable. It's in that pause where curiosity, attention, and unspoken interest quietly exist. Sometimes you may even notice him looking at you when he thinks you're not aware, not in a hidden or secretive way, but in those natural, unguarded moments when people forget to control themselves. That's usually when the real emotion slips through. Because no matter how composed someone tries to appear, the eyes often move before awareness steps in. And what makes this even more meaningful is consistency. It's not one random moment. It happens again and again. In different settings, in different moods, in different conversations. His gaze keeps finding its way back to you, even when he has every reason to look elsewhere. Because when a man is not interested, his eyes behave casually. They move on quickly. They don't return unless necessary. But when attraction is present, the eyes develop their own pattern. They slow down. They stay a little longer. They come back more often than expected. And without a single word being spoken, something very clear is already happening. His attention is not just passing by you anymore. It is returning to you. Again and again, one of the most honest forms of communication is something most people never actually say out loud. It's not spoken, it's not typed, and it's not planned. It simply happens through the body. Because long before a man admits what he feels, his body starts telling the truth in very subtle ways. And one of the clearest signs is when his entire physical presence begins to turn toward you. At first, it's barely noticeable. You might just feel like his attention is more with you than others in the room. But if you look closely, you start to see a pattern in how he positions himself. His shoulders slowly start facing you. His chest naturally aligns in your direction. Even when he is part of a group conversation, his body seems slightly angled toward you, as if you are the center of his awareness without you asking for it. And it doesn't stop there. Even his feet tell a story. People often overlook this, but feet naturally point toward what the mind is focused on. So while he may be talking to someone else or pretending to engage with the environment, his feet often remain subtly directed toward you. It's a quiet signal that shows where his attention actually wants to stay. There is also a softness that appears in his posture when you are near. He may lean in slightly when you speak, not in an exaggerated way, but just enough to close the space between you. It's not about control or intention. It's about comfort. When someone feels interest, their body relaxes in the direction of that interest, and that relaxation creates alignment. Even in moments where he tries to appear casual, his body doesn't fully disconnect from you. If you move, he may adjust without thinking. If you shift your position, his posture subtly follows. It's almost like his physical awareness is gently synchronized with your presence, even when his mind is focused elsewhere. And what makes this sign so powerful is that it rarely feels forced. There is no obvious effort behind it. He doesn't announce it. He doesn't consciously decide it. It just happens naturally, because the body tends to follow what feels emotionally engaging. When a man is not interested, his body is free. It turns anywhere. It stays open in multiple directions. There is no specific alignment. But when attraction enters the picture, that freedom starts to narrow. His posture becomes more focused, more directed, more centered toward one person without him even realizing it. And in those quiet physical details, shoulders, stance, direction, posture, you start to see something simple but very real. His attention is no longer scattered across the room. It is gently, consistently, and physically leaning toward you. When a man starts feeling drawn to someone, one of the quiet changes you'll notice is how he suddenly becomes a little more conscious of himself. Not in a dramatic or showy way, but in small, almost automatic adjustments. It's like your presence quietly wakes up a part of him that normally stays relaxed. He doesn't always realize it, but he starts paying more attention to how he looks, how he stands, and how he comes across when you are around. You might see it in simple moments. He fixes his hair without thinking too much about it. He straightens his shirt or adjusts his sleeves. He sits a little more properly or stands a bit taller when you enter the space. None of this feels forced. It's subtle, almost natural, but the timing is what makes it meaningful. These little changes often happen specifically when you're nearby, and it's not about trying to impress in a loud way. It's more about awareness. When someone matters to us, we start seeing ourselves through their presence. He may not consciously say, "I need to look better," but his behavior quietly shifts in that direction. He becomes slightly more alert, slightly more put together, as if your presence adds a soft pressure of attention he didn't feel before. Even his voice can change a little. Sometimes he speaks a bit more clearly, or becomes more careful with his words, not because he's nervous in a negative way, but because he's more present. He's aware of how he's being perceived, even if he doesn't openly admit it. That awareness alone is already a sign that you matter more than just a passing thought in his day. What makes this even more interesting is that it doesn't happen with everyone. He doesn't adjust himself this way in every interaction. It's specific. It's selective. Around most people, he stays relaxed and unbothered, but around you, something shifts. There is a quiet level of effort that wasn't there before, not to change who he is, but to show up a little more intentionally. And sometimes it shows in the smallest details. He may become more mindful of his posture when sitting near you. He might subtly check his reflection in passing surfaces, or he may pause for half a second before approaching you, just to make sure he's composed. These are not big actions, but they are consistent signals of awareness. Because when a man is not interested, he doesn't think twice about how he looks in your presence. He remains unchanged, unaffected. But when attraction is present, even at a quiet level, your presence starts to matter in how he carries himself. And that's the key point here. He doesn't change who he is, but he becomes more aware of how he is being seen when you are around. One of the most revealing signs of attraction is not what someone says or does on purpose, but what slips out before they can control it. Because no matter how composed a person tries to be, real interest always finds small ways to show itself. And when a man is drawn to you, his reactions become slightly faster, slightly softer, and a lot more noticeable around you even when he is trying to act normal. You may see it in the smallest things, the way his face changes when you enter the room. Not a big expression, not something dramatic, but a subtle shift that happens almost instantly. Maybe his eyes brighten for a moment, maybe his focus sharpens, maybe there's a small pause in what he was doing, just for a second too long. These tiny reactions are often automatic, not planned, and that's what makes them so real. Even in conversation, you might notice how he responds differently to you compared to others. When you speak, he reacts a little quicker. He listens a little more closely. Sometimes he smiles slightly before fully processing what you said. It's not about exaggeration, it's about engagement. Your presence seems to trigger a more active version of his attention, even when he is trying to stay composed. And what's even more interesting is the contrast. He may be calm on the outside, but internally there's a small shift happening, a kind of awareness that he doesn't fully control. That's why you might catch moments where he tries to play it cool, but his reactions still leak through. A quick glance when you laugh, a subtle change in tone when you address him, a slight hesitation before he replies, as if your words carry a little more weight than others. Sometimes even silence reveals it. If there's a pause in conversation, he doesn't fully disconnect from you the way he does with others. Instead, he remains slightly tuned in, not staring, not pushing, just present. Like his attention hasn't fully left your space, even when nothing is being said. And this is what makes this sign so powerful. It's not about big actions, it's about involuntary responses, the kind that happen before thought catches up. Because when someone is emotionally neutral, their reactions are predictable and steady. But when attraction enters, even quietly, those reactions become inconsistent in the most telling way. He might try to act normal. He might try to stay relaxed, but your presence still creates a response in him, small, natural, and unfiltered. And over time, those moments start forming a pattern that quietly shows something he may not have said out loud yet, but is already showing through the way he reacts to you without even trying. At the end of the day, attraction is rarely something that arrives with clear words or perfect timing. It shows up in pieces, in behavior, in energy, in the way someone reacts when you're near. And if you've been paying attention, then you already understand something most people miss for a long time. The body speaks before the mouth does. A man may not always say what he feels, but his presence often gives him away in quiet, honest ways. But here's the part that really matters. This isn't about overthinking every glance or reading too deeply into every small movement. It's about awareness. It's about noticing patterns instead of chasing confusion. Because when you start seeing how people naturally behave around you, you stop guessing and start understanding. Still, the most powerful shift is not in reading others. It's in understanding yourself, how you feel in someone's presence, whether their attention feels calm or confusing, whether their energy adds peace or pressure, because real connection is never just about signs from one side. It's about how both energies meet in the middle. So if this message made you reflect even a little, take that awareness with you. Don't rush it. Don't force, meaning where it doesn't feel natural. Just observe, feel, and trust what is consistent over time. And now I'm curious, have you ever noticed these subtle signs in real life and only understood them later? Share your experience, because your story might help someone else see things more clearly too.